It's a Track Stitch podcast coming up, a special Thanksgiving holiday edition of the pod. I'm going to answer some viewer mailbag questions, and then I'm going to have a little bit of fun as I give out the first ever Track Stitch turkeys of the year. That's coming up on deck. But first, you guys know the drill by now. It's Lloydie, it's PC, it's Mary Decker, Steve, some of the greats, and of course, the great Track Stitch band.
Champion, Lloyd is bearing down on top of Ngoogie. Ngoogie digs deep and he's got no ball. And Andrew Lloyd wins the game.
Récupéré ensuite chez lui au Maroc à Ifrane.
La Web, il est parti à la Web, il a tenté le coup du siècle là.
Oui,
surprendre tout le monde. Au 800.
Final of the men's 10,000 meters in 19.
Not the ball out. Oh, it looks to be. Who else is in the race? The wave is there. The confidence is there.
Okay, recording the podcast. It is Friday, the 28th of November, the day after Thanksgiving here in the US. Before we get started, just want to shout out to Rich and Siri fan podcast. They invited us over for Thanksgiving dinner yesterday with their family. Amazing time, tons of turkey, tons of sides. They had everything, beans, stuffing, mashed potato, and of course pie afterwards. It was incredible. So thanks to you guys. We had a fantastic time. Obviously, Shano is not here with me today after his triumphant return a week ago. He is down playing in the 5th unofficial World Golf Major. No, it's not TPC, it's Sawgrass and the Players' Championships. It's the NZ Run Golf Open that is happening right now in Christchurch, New Zealand. So he is down there showing everybody how it's done. So it's just going to be me seeing if I can pull this one off solo. So let's get straight into it. We've got some mailbag questions that came in. And yeah, let's get stuck in just like a turkey dinner. First one comes in from Biana. He asks, I follow Jakob Ingebrigtsen on Instagram, social media, and notice he does a lot of his treadmill and track workouts in his alpha flies / super shoes. Is this really a good thing for his body, especially with his Achilles issues? This is a great question. Got a few props with me. Hopefully I can explain or just give a point of view. First thing I would say is that I'm not an expert on this with respect to the biomechanics and the health and physiology of Jakob Ingebrigtsen. I don't know. But what I can do is talk just a little bit about what some of these guys do. This is a nice super foam, super shoe midsole. I've even got a little mysterious carbon fiber plate here. Where to start? Look, the first thing I would say with respect to super shoes is that, of course, they were originally designed and concepted to support road running. They weren't designed for soft surfaces or a compliant surface on its own, like a track. We don't really know sort of the research and the data if they are actually better for running on the track. Some people believe so. That's absolutely fine. For the sake of this, it's not really important. But the most important thing is that these were designed for road running, and also they weren't designed really for everyday running. And a lot of that comes down just to the inherent durability of the foams being used, sort of the magic in these shoes. So they weren't really designed for incredibly high mileage, and they weren't designed to be run in every single day. So, a guy like Jakob obviously gets all his product for free, like a lot of the top pros. It's not an issue for him. So it can be easy just to want to put these products on and just go for it on the track. So what might be at the cause of his problems? Well, here is a potential hypothesis or theory. Look, when we're talking about the super foam midsoles, right, the most important thing we're looking at is that compression of the foam. So what is actually happening with these sort of new foams, and I can probably show you here, we're getting a lot of compression that happens really, really quickly, and then a lot of resilience and rebound, or, as the brands like to call it, energy return. And of course, when you're running forwards and you've got your forward foot strike, that's what's sort of enabling this collapsing of the forefoot, and that's in conjunction with the nice little, spoon-shaped plate here that sort of acts as like this lever to give you this extra push forward. So imagine that as you're putting all your body weight down through your shoe into the ground, right, this foam and we're now seeing potentially 25, 30 millimeters of it in the forefoot. Is compressing really easy, and it's sort of enabling you to almost fall forward with every step. It's giving you a little center of gravity advantage. Just really advantageous in that respect, particularly when you're running on your forefoot. But what you need to think about here is what happens when you do start heel striking a little bit. And I know some of you might say, well, a guy like Jakobs or another top pro, they really don't heel strike. Well, that is not true. Everybody heel strikes, even the best runners, even the guys on the track will at some point after a certain amount of fatigue in their bodies, they are going to start heel striking just a little bit. And now you need to think of what potentially the opposite sort of reaction in this is. So in the forefoot, if you are sort of landing and putting the majority of your mass and force on the forefoot and is compressing, that's great because it's going to propel you forward. But you need to ask yourself, what happens if you start putting just a little bit of force into the heel of the shoe, right? Well, your heel is going to want to sink into the platform of the midsole the same way that your forefoot does when you're moving forwards. So now, let's think about it like this. If Jakobs is out there running potentially 5,000, 6,000, anywhere up to, say, 12,000 meters on the track, that is a lot of foot strikes he is making, and at some point his heel is going to be going into, he's going to be sort of heel striking, and his heel is going to be compressing in the 35, 38 millimeters of foam that is in the heel of some of these super shoes. So now let's think about what that might be doing for his lower leg muscles. As he is sinking in, but still moving forwards, it's just going to be creating just that little bit of extra stress and stretch, for example, in his calf muscles, and his calf muscles are attached to his Achilles tendon, loads of other ligaments and amazing, sheath tendons, all that kind of stuff in his lower legs. So this is where you do have to be careful in wearing these shoes, because there is a trade-off to the performance benefits. Nothing is always like sort of a benefit positive to a massive extreme. I'd say the benefits far outweigh the negatives of super shoes. But in this particular case, you'd need to think about what is just happening over the course of all these steps is that heel at some point is compressing into this foam and just creating that little bit of extra stress that is very, very repetitive, particularly when you're running on a treadmill or on a track. And you've got to take into account also that you're running typically in the same direction around the track, in an anti-clockwise direction. And another thing that a friend of mine, we were talking about, he said that he's seen Jakobs training a lot on the track, and what he tends to do is that he doesn't start his reps from a standing start, right? And he doesn't necessarily come completely rolling into these reps at full speed. He sort of walks in kind of slowly. He always starts on his left foot and then makes like a big push to get started, whether he's running a 235K or a 55-second quarter, whatever. Now, you also have to think about what kind of stresses that is going to put on your lower legs. All these little things when you are training at the sort of a level or that guy does, which is basically world record, world champion, Olympic champion level, these things over time are going to accumulate. So are super shoes causing his issues? I don't really know. Are they helping or hindering him precluding to these particular injuries? Again, I don't know for sure, but I would just give an opinion on this one that you should just always think about this. There is a lot going on when you are talking about your foot moving up and down under body weight into a medium like a foam. There is just a lot going on, and obviously that doesn't happen with firmer platforms or when you are running on a firmer ground. So that is what I would say about that one. Do I know that it is good for him or bad for him with respect to his Achilles injury? Again, no sort of firm diagnosis there from my side, but that's kind of just something we should keep in mind that it potentially could be. All right, moving forward, the next question comes in from JJ, a man that I hold dear to my heart. Used to work with JJ at Adidas for a long time. He says, love the 800-meter special with Justin Rinaldi, but not enough mention of Alberto Juantorena, and where was Steve Ovett, a.k.a. the GOAT? Well, he's here on the microphone because he is also one of my favorite, if not my favorite, all-time middle distance runner across, of course, the 800 meters and the 1500. Let's have a look at Juantorena. And I have to be honest, after the podcast with Justin, I I watched it back and had a listen. I thought, man, I really did not speak so much or enough about Alberto Juantorena. He is one of the all-time greats, obviously in the distance. The last man to win the 400, 800 double at the Olympic Games. He probably will be the last man to ever do that. And I also even thought to myself, though, man, I didn't even talk that much about Joachim Cruz, even though Joachim Cruz was a big hero of mine as a kid growing up, who I tried to copy some of his awesome circuit training, and I got a photo with him and had him sign a picture for me. So it just shows how hard it is to get on this list. Excuse me, when you're talking about the guys like David Rudisha and Wilson Kipketer and even Peter Snell and Seb Coe, that's all I really have. It's just really tough. Look, I think with Juantorena, I think one thing that counted against him was obviously that back in his particular era, there was no World Championships. There was just the Olympic Games. We didn't get to see these guys that often. The European circuit was still, finding its way and in creation. So these guys weren't out there sort of running fast races all the time. I think Juantorena only ran 4 times under 144 in his career, which seems modest by today's standards. Was obviously excellent back then. I think his second biggest victory in his career was the World University Games, of all things. So, again, I want to have Juantorena higher. It's certainly not that he is an afterthought in the GOAT or best ever discussion. He is certainly right there. I just don't think we can put him in the Mount Rushmore when you compare to some of those other guys. But he absolutely one of the great 800-meter runners, no doubt about that. Al Caballo, I know he's one of JJ's favorite runners and also one of mine, but yeah, not quite there, JJ. Steve Ovett. This one is really interesting. Obviously, like Juantorena, Olympic champion. Harry Wilson believed famously that he could run under 140. Not quite sure about that. His PR, 144.09. That was from the European Championships in 1978. Bit of a shock result there as Olaf Beyer beat him and Seb Coe in Prague. Never did anything after. Like a few sort of rumors about what could be going on there with respect to Olaf Beyer. But once again, it's just Ovett. He doesn't really have that super high in resume over the 800, and it works against him that he obviously was one of the all-time greats over the 1500 mile in those, that epic era of UK miling, going back and forward with Seb Coe for a lot of those 1500 and mile records. I think really what is an interesting question with Steve Ovett is what could he have run for 800? Because I talked about this with Justin, that back in this era, in this late 70s, early 80s era, the amount of opportunity that these guys had to run fast was just not what we saw or what we do see today, even from the top guys in the sport, right? There just weren't as many fast 800-meter races where these guys were just going after world records all the time. They were typically only 1 or 2 really hot races per season. If you were lucky to be in them, you were there. If not, well, it was kind of you had to wait until next year. So the question is always like, what could Ovett have ultimately run over 100? It's interesting when you look at a guy like Steve Cram, right? Let's take Crammy. Crammy was like a 48 mid 400-meter runner. I think he ran one time. He was very proud of running 47 point in a relay over 400. Steve Ovett, much quicker. He was already a 47 point guy at high school over 400 meters. So he had arguably better, well, not arguably, he did have better natural speed than Steve Cram. And then pretty comparable over the mile, obviously Cram ran that world record, 346, 34, 32 or 34, 346.3, either way. Not quite as fast from Ovett's side, but again, maybe just because of a lack of opportunity. But Ovett was definitely very strong and maybe stronger over Cram over the 3K distance. I know that Ovett ran in the low 740s, Cram in the mid 740s. So the point is they were very comparable with those bookend performances over similar distances. Cram 329.7 over 1500, or 329.6, correction, over 1500 meters, and Ovett 330.7. Ovett also probably with the ability to run under 330 in the right race. The point is that Cram ran 142.88. It's hard to make a case that Steve Ovett would not be sort of in that ballpark. And, I wonder if it was not a bit of a mistake from Ovett back in 1979 when Seb Coe broke the world record with that historic 1:42.33 in Oslo. Not quite sure why Steve Ovett wasn't in the race that day. That would have seemed like a perfect race for him in the same way that that Cram had Joachim Cruz to pace him that night when he ran his PR in Zurich. That would have been the perfect opportunity for Ovett, who typically didn't like leading 800s. He was a bit more comfortable just taking out the front in the 1500. He didn't quite like to lead 800s. He liked to sit on a shoulder and key off a runner in front of him. That would have been a perfect race for him to really run fast. Would he have beaten Coe? Not sure about that. I mean, he did beat him a year later in a more physical, different race in Moscow, so maybe not. But either way, there's no doubt he would have been there or thereabouts and probably under 143. By the time we got into the 80s, I just wonder if he looked at that record that Coe had put by mid-1981 at under 142, obviously 141.73, and was just like, that's probably a little bit beyond me, and he really focused on the 1500 mile. That could well be the case. His career was obviously, unfortunately, no pun intended, derailed by the infamous church rail incident at the end of 1981 that forced him to miss a lot of 1982. And he never really came back with the same power and force over the 800-meter distance that he had before. In fact, one of the great performances, the great gutsy performances of his career was making that final in the 800 meters as defending champ in LA, where he had to dive across the line in the semi-final. And then really struggled in the final. I think he ran 152. Of course, and he famously stepped off the track in the 1500 final with the respiratory problems from the air quality in LA. But, I think putting him up there in the GOATs over the 800 meters, probably, again, I wouldn't even have, for example, him above Alberto Juantorena. I feel like Juantorena was a better 800 meter runner than Steve Ovett was. They were both Olympic champions. Juantorena, of course, ran the world record, was a bit faster. So I'm not quite sure whether I'd put Ovett up there. He is definitely in the GOAT discussion when it comes to the middle distance, that classic 800 meter, 1500 meter runner. But over the 800, I'm going to have to disappoint you, JJ. I'm not sure if I can get there with the great Steve Ovett. All right, moving forward. Next question comes from James. He says, so much hype around or about Jane Hedengren. What about Innes Fitzgerald from the UK? Same age, ran 3 Diamond League meets last year, represented UK at the World Champs. Where is the love for Innes? Well, it's not that there isn't any love for Innes. James, she is incredible. It did actually force me to really look into her resume. They're both obviously amazing, but here's the thing with Jane Hedengren, location. US high school records are a big deal here. NCAA is a big deal here. Diljit Taylor and the BYU distance running program is a big deal, and Jane Hedengren is right at the top of the list. She nearly became the first freshman in over 40 years to win NCAA cross, just losing out to Doris Lemongold there in the final 500 meters. When we look at it, right, Innes Fitzgerald, they are the same age. Innes Fitzgerald is a little bit older at 5 months. Jane Hedengren is more of that 1500 3K runner right now. She's run 4:04, which is incredible for a freshman, and also 8:40 over 3K. Innes Fitzgerald, more of a 3K, 5K runner. She ran the 5K at the World Championships for the UK, 3:32.90 and 14:39, and of course those Diamond League appearances. Who's better right now? I mean, if we want to fly the flag for the Commonwealth, James, we can probably give Innes Fitzgerald the nod here, but only just. Both of them are exceptional talent, and ultimately, who cares? Let's see who kicks on to be a great senior, and hopefully they're both not destroying themselves in training at this young age. We talk a lot about what the length of the window is, how much the body can withstand. We talk about relative effort from training as a pro and an adult, and it being very similar to just training at a very high level as a teenager. So let's just hope that both of those two young women just are progressing at a nice measured fashion, and they are going to be superstars when they turn senior. All right, the next one. This is from .com. This is not actually a question. .com, he sent me a link here after the emergency podcast regarding the controversy Well, the controversy of the NCAA cross-country championships and the course cutting, should things have been, whatever, everybody knows the story by now. But he sent me a really interesting article here about an athlete called Mike Del Cavo, who went to Western State College in Colorado. This is from 1993, the NCAA Division II cross-country champs. And the story is that Mike Del Cavo was running towards kind of the back of the field, just pacing himself, working his way up. And they got to a sort of inflection point on the course where, one of those classic, you could go this way, you could go the other. The entire field, 128 runners, basically the entire field, 123 of them took the wrong turn, which ended up taking over 1,000 meters off the course. As he was running, Mike Del Cavo was yelling out, guys, you're going the wrong way, you're going the wrong way. He makes the decision to go the right way. He takes another 4 runners with him. They run the full distance, but unfortunately, he ends up coming in as per the race, just straight up start to finish. He comes in 123rd out of 128, even though technically he ran the full distance and won the race and should have been, I guess, to the letter of the law or the rules, he should have been the NCAA Division II champ that year. They did not file a protest because of just the sheer volume of athletes that went the wrong way. And also it was kind of out of respect to Adam State, shout out Mike McManus, who were going for some kind of record number of team wins, and that just would have messed it all up. So they didn't protest. And Mike Del Cavo ends up with the ultimate stitch-up of running the full distance, winning that race, and then it's like, no, you finished 123rd out of 128. So not really a question there, but that's actually a really interesting story. If you guys want to check that out, just use the good old Google and go see what is going on there. All right. Hey, we also got a request from Swanee. Got a question from him. Swanee, we're going to save that one for next week. This was an NCAA, a New Zealand schools question. Really good question from Swanee. Going to save that one for next week when I'm in New Zealand with Rhodey and we do the podcast there together for the first time. So Swanee, I did not forget you. We're going to answer that question next week. All right, time to have a little bit of fun. It is Thanksgiving, so no better time than now to hand out the inaugural Track Stitch Turkeys of the Year. Full disclosure, nothing personal. We've all been turkeys before. Don't take any of this too seriously. The Track Stitch technical team have come up trumps again. Let's get into it. The Turkeys of the Year. Sofian Albakali brought to tears by Hawke's Bay's own Geordie Beamish after the final of the 3,000 metre steeplechase. It's just running, mate. You are already one of the all-time greats. You will be fine. You get a turkey for that. Cole Hocker gets himself disqualified at the World Champs in the 1,500 metres. Could have been the first man since Bernard Lagat to do the 1,500 5K double. Just terrible positioning from Cole. He gets a turkey there. Chris Robinson wins the 400-metre hurdles at the Golden Spike meet in Ostrava. His turkey made an early appearance, so he gets a Thanksgiving turkey for that. Josh Hoey, one of the great seasons from Josh, under 143, under 330. But he parted ways with Justin Rinaldi. What are you doing? You get a turkey for that. Ruth Chipnichich gets busted. Ran under 210, of course, for the marathon last year. She got caught at a half marathon early in the year. Just a terrible situation here. Why? You could have got away with it, but you didn't. That is good. You get a turkey. World Athletics, please come in and get rid of that record. Fred Curley gets himself tasered on South Beach, Florida, inserting himself into a situation that didn't even involve him to begin with. A number of off-track issues for Fred this year, unfortunately. That gets a turkey. Jakobs left Achilles, robbed us of a season from the great man in his prime. Come on, Achilles, start playing ball. You get a turkey. Sha'Carri Richardson gets herself arrested at Seattle Airport on the way to US Nationals. If you're going to assault your boyfriend, probably don't do it right at a TSA checkpoint. That deserves a turkey. Men's cross country at NCAA championships. A number of athletes cutting the course. What are you guys doing? That is definitely against the spirit of the rules. You guys all deserve turkeys for that. But the grand turkey, the turkey of the year, surely has got to go to Grand Slam track. Talk about over-promising and under-delivering. They spent a lot of money that it turns out they didn't actually have. The worst part about it all, not a lot of humility and accountability being shown from the leadership. That gets the Turkey of the Year. And those were the inaugural Track Stitch Turkey of the Year awards. Once again, just a little bit of fun. Don't take any of it too seriously. That's about all I've got for the podcast today. Just a short one. I'm sure you're happy about that one. Going to be in New Zealand next week. Reunited with Shano. That makes things so much easier. So really looking forward to that. Just wanted to also give a shout out to a new subscriber on the channel, G Shaw, a medalist at the New Zealand Secondary Schools Championships over 800 metres back in 1999. One of the greats. Welcome on board, G Shaw. Can also apparently bowl a cricket ball about 125 kilometres an hour, so that's an achievement. Good to have you, G Shaw. That's all I've got for you guys. Hope you had great Thanksgivings and enjoy the rest of the holiday season, and we'll catch you guys next week with Shano here on the Track Stitch podcast. Peace.